UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military black projects, false flag alien invasion psyop, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join UFO historian Don Ecker, MUFON State Director for New York Chris Torme, retired veteran pilot Commander Cobra, and well-esteemed host and researcher Martin Willis as they discuss the latest news and topics regarding UAPs with a no-holds-barred approach on UAP Crossfire.
Well, good evening, greatest audience on the planet. Welcome back to UAP Crossfire. As you can see, we have our act together tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I can't wait to hear the reaction of my co-host's fantastic look. Chris Torme, Martin Willis, Don Ecker. How are you this evening, gentlemen?
We're here.
Awesome.
Great.
So for those that
right
would
out
love,
here.
for those folks that would love a screenshot that we did before we came on the show, you just have to hit Commander Cobra KGRADB at gmail.com, and I will gladly send you the screenshot that we did coming into the show. As always, love to talk to the greatest audience on the planet. Thank you very much for tuning into our show. We have a lot of fun going on. One quick admin, if you look at the little logo behind me, it is the logo for a whiskey company that mixes American rye whiskey with peanut butter. One of my favorites. I didn't think I would like this very much. Someone gave it to me, and I tried it, loved it. It's called Screwball. And not that I'm saying that my co-hosts are screwballs, but quite honestly, I thought it fit just a tiny bit. So if anybody would love to spin this company up, go to their website, screwball.com. Tell them that the four horsemen of the UAP, Crossfire, sent you, or Commander Cobra sent you, or both. I'd love them to get their website blown up by this audience. We call tonight's show Hail and Farewell. We're hailing back Don Ecker, who was out, not feeling well. Decker, how are you tonight?
Well, I'll tell you what, still on the mend, Charlie Deuce, but much better than I was.
Excellent. Chris, how are you, sir? Those look like Musketeers. You look like you got like Minnie Mouse things in your head now.
Yeah. Hey, why not? I could be a wolf Minnie Mouse on the show. How's that?
Perfect. How are you?
Only I would come up with that. Mickey Mouse.
You did a kind of a guest appearance last week because it was your lovely wife's birthday. So you are a little bit late coming into the show.
I told her birthday had to end at 9:00 so I can come on the show for an hour.
What a sweetheart.
Yeah, I might not make it to my next birthday, though. We'll see.
After that.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And Mr. Willis, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. I'm down in South Carolina now. I can't remember. Was I here last week?
Yes.
I don't know if I made it down. I was. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because we were talking about your queen size Murphy bed that's behind you.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yep. All good down here. Love being down this part of the country this time of year. I understand you. Right where I'm from, up in Rockland, Maine, boy, there was all kinds of buildings underwater, a big storm surge. And you got hit pretty, well, not so bad where you're at, right, Commander?
We actually got quite a bit of flooding around us, but the real talk of the town was, I don't know if you are, how familiar you are with Hampton Beach.
Yeah.
But the 2 to 3 blocks in from the beach, those poor people got flooded with the surge, and it wasn't even a high tide.
Jeez,
so it was quite a mess. Rockport, all the rocks that line the road were in the road. They had to bring the snow plows down to push the rocks back to the side of the road. So that's the kind of stuff that's going on. Almost sounds like California, the promised land where Don Ecker hangs his hat.
Yeah. That's bound to fall in the sea, right? They've been talking about that for years. Waterfront property in Arizona.
We had a scare
what happened?
last weekend. Had nothing to do with any flooding, but there was what is known as a pre-shock. One jolt that was right on the San Andreas Fault, and it was intersecting another fault. And we were on a high alert through Monday. They were fearful of a major quake popping up. They called it a pre-shock because it was only one with no aftershocks. So I got to tell you, we were a little bit on pins and needles there for a while.
I bet.
We haven't really had, anything serious in quite a long time. But that was
I will tell you where I'm at. That first time in this area that I live in now, we had our first tornado warning. We've had 7 feet of snow last year in 48 hours. We've had an earthquake for the first time in Buffalo, New York. And now the high winds have almost become a tornado warning here where Satan has taken a dump. Let me tell you. I mean, it is just the weather up here. When it comes to weather, it's horrible.
Wow.
Well,
Okay.
I wanted to ask Don, was there any reports around the earthquake of UAP activity?
no,
Lights. Earthquake
not
lights.
a thing I heard. Nothing.
And it's interesting to me because I remember probably right up to the 90s, before the internet really took hold, it seemed that always within days, it would be reported in the media of lights or associated phenomena around the earthquake in the sky. I'm not talking about the reactions that animals have and all that kind of stuff. Speaking of which, Chris pointed out earlier that I have giant sheep ears if I position my head just right during the evening.
It's pretty nice.
We'll be kicking up the Screwball logo later, but with these eyes, with these glasses. Okay, I see some reaction to the glasses. Thank you all very much. Whoever sends me the best email, I promise I will send a set of these glasses to somebody in the audience, but they have to send it to my Commander Cobra KGRA DB at Gmail, and I will get a set to them.
That's Mary Grace Kirby. I have to say, she just made that comment as a joke, but she meant to say Bill, I think. But anyway, she is a longtime follower of the show. Always has great comments. Good to see you in here, and good to see everyone here in
Mary.
chat. Thanks for joining.
She is in frequently. I love her little remarks of the show. Thank you very much, Mary Grace, for joining us.
Yes.
I look like a goat. Well, it's actually a sheep, but it's correct. It's
close enough.
At least
yeah,
it's genus. That's right.
That's right.
Well, we have some sad news, and that's
if you get rid of those ears,
it's
I was going to say, if you got rid of those
farewell.
ears behind you, that actually looks like an alien head.
Maybe I'll try that for next week.
It does.
Or Monday.
Or Monday. Monday. That's the other piece of news I got to put in for Don's show, because Don missed us on our retrospective for 2023. We're going to join Don as his guest on his show, Dark Matters, on Monday. And we're going to do this group, the Four Horsemen here. We're going to do another review show, but with the gentle hand of Don guiding the conversation. So I think it'll be well worth your time, if you have the time, to join us on one of the best shows on KGRA. And you're looking at three people that have three of the best shows on KGRA, from Martin, Chris, and Don. And I say that with a very full heart, because these are some real pros that do the work, really do the heavy lifting as far as I'm concerned. And we're going to be together with him. Don, what time do you air Pacific and Eastern time?
4 o'clock on Monday Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. So
And
right here
since
on
Chris
KGRA,
has the near musketeer look with his glasses up on his head, Mickey's big hand is on the 12, and the little hand would be on the 7 for the East Coast, and just work backwards from there.
Exactly.
So that's what we got coming up, and we have a really great, fun show coming up next week. We have a special guest. I'm not going to announce now. You need to tune in, but I think you're going to enjoy next week's show. It's one of my favorite people, that's in the sphere of KGRA DB, who's going to be joining us. Okay, sad news with the passing of Tracy Torme. We're going to talk about him a little bit. What he, well, we're going to explain who he is for those who may not know him. I got to catch a interview that Don did on one of the many shows that he was co-hosting with, and it was really quite good. And we have a little clip that we're going to play towards the end of this first half that will take us out on this part of the show. But before I go to Don and have Don kind of take the horn on this particular part, Martin, Chris, do you guys have any things you want to share about Tracy? Excuse me.
Go ahead, Martin.
I really have never had any contact with Tracy, and I understand he was involved in some UFO things over the years, but I've never really had any contact with him. Of course, I knew of his father for many years, Mel Torme, the Velvet singer.
That Velvet Fog, correct? Wasn't that the line that
Velvet
they used for him?
Fog. The Velvet Fog.
Is that what it is? Yeah. Yeah. But I remember him, like growing up. And then I have a friend that was a crazy fan of his, back in like the 1980s, where, most people weren't really listening, my age at that time, listening to Mel Torme, but the guy loved him. But yeah, I mean, I really don't, never really had any contact with him myself. Chris?
What about you, Chris?
I am like Martin. I had very little contact with him, but when I did have some contact with him, I always considered him a straight shooter, square, tell you the real deal. And his passing, I think, is a loss to all of us. It's one of those things where he made a good name for himself. And I think his name will live on in certain respects. And I'm sorry that he did pass, because I thought, when he said something, you could take it to the bank.
We have an expression. I put this when I was writing up some stuff. Aviators from the First World War, when they would make a salute to someone who has passed, they'd say that that person, in this case Tracy, has gone west, and that was an expression to the Allied pilots who would turn west trying to make it back to friendly lines in France. And that was, getting home and getting to sanctuary. So unfortunately, I did not know Tracy. The only real contact I had was from the bit of that Don had provided in an interview. And then when we were getting ready for the show, he provided me some stuff to read and look at, and pretty interesting background. Definitely had a real interesting career in and around it, and it's interesting to be the son of someone famous like that and be in the area that he was known. So, Don, I'm going to turn it over to you. Remember, about minute 45 or so, I'm going to probably start talking to try to get us to transition over to a clip that we're going to run on the show. But Don, Go ahead. Give us a couple impressions on Tracy, please.
Well, I met Tracy when I moved down to California in 1988 to be with my then girlfriend, who later became my wife, Vicki Cooper. Vicki was the editor, and she was the person that founded, she and her partner, UFO Magazine. And I had at that time a rather interesting foray into the field. But when I got down here, Tracy was one of the people that I met very early on. And of course, I knew who he was. I knew who his dad was, Mel Torme, famous guy. Not only a crooner, but a lot of people are not aware that Mel Torme also did some professional acting.
Yep.
And surprisingly, one of the early acting jobs he had, he was playing a thug gangster. Now, if you ever
it's
saw,
so hard to picture that. It's hard to picture that.
yeah, but he was convincing. Believe me, he was convincing. So anyway, I like Tracy almost right off the bat. He was then traveling quite a bit with another guy that I got to know rather well, Barry Taff, and Barry and he were for a while there pretty inseparable. They were very close friends, and we started talking because I was curious about the UFO field that he was so interested in. And the first thing I had to figure out is what he was basically doing. Now, he was a professional, at that time, screenwriter, which he maintained almost the rest of his life. He had written for Saturday Night Live for a couple of seasons, which was pretty wild. And then he transitioned almost seamlessly into Star Trek, The Next Generation, the brand new Star Trek show, the first one since the original Star Trek. And he was big into science fiction. And as a matter of fact, one of the shows that Tracy wrote, he ended up winning a Peabody Award. And he and Gene Roddenberry, who at that time was his mentor, okay, Roddenberry took Tracy for some reason under his wing and became his mentor. And it was a marvelous thing for Tracy. Now, Tracy had a lot of tendrils going out into some of the other franchises, like The Outer Limits, The Twilight Zone. He was doing a lot of stuff for a lot of these programs. But with Star Trek, if you've ever watched Star Trek, if you're a Star Trek fan, how many times have they gone to the holodeck? Well, that was Tracy Torme's invention. He was the one that brought the holodeck into the Star Trek franchise. And the very first Star Trek show where Captain Picard, Patrick Stewart, became Dixon Hall, I believe it was Dixon Hall, the private detective.
Right.
Okay. This was big stuff. Now, we used to have a lot of private conversations about various aspects in the field. Later on, okay, like 15 years after this part, I was doing Dark Matters Radio on a radio network out of Boston, Mass, called Cyberstation USA. And I did Dark Matters there for 5 or 6 years. God, I can't remember anymore. But we were talking. We used to call each other quite a bit. And he had called me up one night. And we were talking, and he was telling me some stories about, well, some of this could go public. Some of it was private, about a lot of personalities in the Hollywood field. And I asked him about Gene Roddenberry. I've always been a Star Trek fan. I've been a Star Trek fan since the 70s. Now, I never watched it when it was on first run in the 60s. But later, after I got back from the Army and what have you, and they were running it in syndication, I began watching it. And oh my God, I loved it. It was great. Well, I was curious about Gene Roddenberry. So he started talking about Roddenberry taking him under his wing as a mentor. And then he told me something shocking about Roddenberry. I'm not going to go into it here, but you will hear about it in a few minutes. from Tracy's own lips, because I had an idea. I said, Tracy, I said, you have so damn many stories that are so fascinating. I said, how would you feel about, once, twice a month coming on DMR and doing a short mini interview about various aspects of the field? Now, he was up to his eyebrows in UFO stuff. As a matter of fact, Travis Walton, in large part, the story widespread as it is now, was a result of Tracy Torme, because of Tracy wanting to do a film about Fire in the Sky. Now, Fire in the Sky had a curious aspect to it, too. About the time they started doing, well, he had the screenplay done. It had to be greenlit, of course. The studio picked it up. They started casting for it, and they ended up starting to film it. But the part that had Tracy going crazy was at near the end of the film, when Walton was abducted by the aliens. Of course, now, probably most of you guys and gals are very familiar with the basic genesis of what happened, the story, what Walton talked about many times in interviews and many times in public lectures. But the aliens were, according to what Travis actually said, were the little gray guys, and then the humanoids called the tall whites. Okay. Now that's who he claims he encountered on board this craft when he became conscious. Now, he believed that he had been inadvertently killed when he ran toward the saucer that zapped him with some kind of light beam. At least that's the working theory. And the reason they abducted him was to bring him on board, this is the supposition, to revive him. And obviously, if this happened, and there are a lot of weird things about that story. I'm not totally convinced, but I'm on the road to something of extraordinary significance happened there. But to make a long story short, he went a little batshit crazy when he woke up. And he grabbed something off a table, some type of a tube or something, and he began waving it around. He felt very threatened. And these little gray guys skittered out, and then these tall whites came in. He saw them, he laid it down, and so on. I mean, that's basically the story. Well, in the movie, okay, at that period of time, a mini-series had just been played on television, inspired by Bud Hopkins, concerning abductions. Now, I forget anymore, because this is over 30 years ago, what that mini-series was. But the suits at the studio knew about that. So they wanted to change the whole end of the movie. And Torme was crazed by this. If you saw the film, you remember the film where he was down on a table or something, and they had what looked like plastic saran wrap around his face, and he was struggling to breathe. Do you guys recall that?
I do.
Yeah, well, that was all crap. That was total crap. And Torme was very upset about that. He, as he later told me, he said, but the problem was there wasn't a thing I could do about it. He said, so it had to go. Hey, they were making a multi-million-dollar movie. Okay, well, the suits, of course, always know best. This is the working theory in Hollywood. Now we know how crap that is, but that's the way they approached it. So anyway, he was the guy that really brought forward the Walton story. And really, and I can remember back in those days, I had Walton on my first radio show, UFOs Tonight. I had interviewed Tracy a couple of times, and I knew he was filled with stories. So I said, Tracy, how would you feel about doing something? We could call it something like Tracy Torme's Mad Hollywood Minute. And we could do it, a couple of times a month, even once a month if you're busy, but have an ongoing series. Well, he loved the idea. Well, the very first show that we did concerned his mentor, Gene Roddenberry, the great galactic bird of the universe, okay, the father of Star Trek. Let's take this wagon train to the stars, and the whole schmear there. Now, Tracy knew all those guys. He knew Spock. He knew Kirk. He knew Sulu. He knew all these guys. And he had some really interesting stories about a lot of them. But his other great love was the UFO field. Now, for you longtime UFO guys and gals, in 1988, there was a 2-hour special on commercial television called UFO Undercover or UFO Cover Up Live. Okay. And Tracy was initially a part of that. Now, during that period of time, there were several cases involving UFOs that were at the forefront of the UFO research arena. They included the Bentwaters case, because by that time, a CNN contract reporter by the name of Chuck DeCarroll, a guy I knew, okay, ran a series of specials on CNN about that. This was a joint British-American air base, okay, in Bentwaters. And this was an amazing situation that happened there. Once again, it involved nuclear weapons. This is something that a lot of people are not privy to or aware of. Bentwaters was one of the FOBs, the forward operating bases, in the event that war would have broken out in Europe. At that time, okay, and if you weren't around, you may not be aware of this, but tensions were at a fever pitch. There were revolutions going on in Poland and some of the other Eastern European countries that were part of the Soviet Warsaw Pact nations, okay? They were sick and tired of the communists. They wanted to throw that yoke off them. And if you know anything about your history, you will know that back in 1956 in Hungary, which was a Soviet client state then, there was a revolution where the Soviet army ended up sending in divisions of Soviet tanks to crush that revolution. Well, that was the fear of what might happen in Poland. And there was something else was pretty damn scary. The Russians had invaded Afghanistan, which began a 10-year nightmare for that country, which ultimately caused American involvement that later on, years later, would come back to somewhat bite us in the ass, okay, when we ended up going into Afghanistan. And that was in this century. So there was a lot of fear there. But there were also another series of cases during this time period, and I'm talking 87, 88, 89, that happened in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Now, later, not tonight, but later, one of my many interviews with Tracy is involved with that UFO Cover Up Live special that aired. And the executive producer of that show, and some ins and outs of how American intelligence, oh yeah, the spooks had their fingers in that. And they had that executive producer, I don't want to give too much away, but they had him so terrified. This guy literally was convinced he was being followed everywhere. Used to go, because Tracy was in the same complex that this guy was in. This guy used to go and peek out the bloody windows to see if he had his shadows out there in the parking lot, keeping an eye on him. And a lot of other things about that special that nobody knew about for years, but eventually did come to the forefront. And that's a fascinating thing. But Torme and I ended up doing this for quite a while. Now, some of the topics we covered were the McMinnville, Oregon photographs. That was a very famous case back in the 50s and the early 60s. The Lonnie Zamora case, Socorro, New Mexico, another fascinating case that Tracy knew a heck of a lot about. As a matter of fact, at one point, he was trying to get a film project going about the Socorro case. Dr. Stephen Greer and Tracy Torme, and a little clash that happened there, which will have you rolling on your floor laughing your tail off. But a whole lot of topics and subjects. So this guy knew where a heck of a lot of the bodies were buried, because not only of who he was, but the people that he knew. And it's a fascinating insight into a lot of behind the scenes, in-depth baseball, if you know what I'm saying. So
Don,
this is something
question.
I'm looking forward. Yes.
Quick question, Don. Did he have a particular case that investigation that he did, or something he looked at that he just felt was it? It was the touchstone, the Holy Grail.
Socorro.
Really?
Yeah.
Martin, what do you think about Socorro? I'm curious.
Oh, I've always thought that was one of the big ones myself, because for instance, that was the one where J. Allen Hynek really changed his whole tune on the UFO topic. He went from being a skeptic to someone that took this totally seriously, changed his whole life. And he did claim that.
It's like someone who was that was trying to explain away UFO, and I remember him saying that he thought that particular case was something that could not be explained away, and was like a conversion moment for him.
Yes, and Ray Stanford was there right away, and that's I talked to him many times over the years, and that was one of the ones where and he wrote the book. Let's see, the Pentagon Pantry. I can't.
Yep.
I can't remember the exact title to it. Something like that. And but he was there right away. And one of the things that you don't hear a lot about was that he, when everyone left, he went over to the burn site and he kind of cleared away a little bit of what he was seeing there, and noticed an actual rock that had some metal on it. So he grabbed that rock right out of there, and eventually trusted someone to test it. And of course, they scraped the whole thing off and it was gone. And it took them forever to get the rock back, and there was nothing on it, which is not surprising.
Chris, do you have any reaction to the Socorro?
Well, I think you got to look at, Lonnie Samoro himself. Here's a credible guy that, had a very good career as a police officer. He was a straight shooting type of guy, from what I understand. And he was shaken up. When they went to interview him, he was absolutely shaken up about this whole thing. So, and his story has never changed. He's never elaborated on the story. He's never taken anything back from the story. He's always been consistent. So I think Lonnie Samoro is one of the most credible UFO sightings there is. There's always been talk
he also had incredible ethics, because he ended up resigning from the police department. He resigned because he felt that whatever it was that happened to him was shining too much light on that, and it was impacting his department. And as a result, he left. Now, that took a hell of a guy to do something like that. And not only that, but he never once tried to profit from any of that in any manner or regard. The man was, as a matter of fact, he was loath to even talk about what happened.
That's right. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will tell you this one other thing about the Lonnie Samoro case. It's very similar to a case in Newfield, New York, with a police captain, that I actually worked for this guy. And J. Allen Hynek went up and spoke to this police captain. And he was my captain. We talked about this several times privately.
Yep. And
J. Allen Hynek had turned the corner with the one sighting in Newfield, which was incredibly authentic. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Police captains, police officers, everybody saw this triangle thing out there, and Lonnie Samoro's case. So, I mean, you have to take Lonnie Samoro at his word, because, I mean, there's nothing in his history that showed him to be anything but truly credible. Same thing with this captain that I worked with, who was absolutely credible, who had an amazing sighting that was also investigated by Project Blue Book.
Well, I agree with you, gentlemen. I found everything you have touched upon to be the real convincers on that. And it's an interesting tie-in, obviously, with the three of you and the kind of knowledge. I am merely a pygmy standing amongst giants when it comes to the knowledge on that. But there's certain cases and personalities that were involved that I just, this one resonates, because I think when someone doesn't make money, I don't fault anybody for making money or putting books out and selling the story. I'm completely for that. But it does capture my attention when someone seems to have that kind of old age integrity that, look, this happened. It's causing problems. I'm not afraid to talk about it, but I'm not going any further with this than I have to. It adds a level or a weight of legitimacy to me that really makes me go, I want to pay attention to it in a different way. All right, we have about looks like about 20 minutes to the top. We have about 10 minutes worth of this interview we're going to play going to the top of the hour to the break. Don, give us a little bit of an intro to what we're going to hear. You touched upon the interview of Tracy talked about. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, just real quickly, the reason I posted this last picture here is that is a picture of J. Allen Hynek at Socorro at the incident. He's in an office, but that was during the incident when this picture was taken. I just thought that was interesting. I just found it on Enigma Labs. They have that picture.
Also, Don, you talked about I think the show you were talking about. I looked it up. The Brooklyn Bridge UFO abduction. I think that was the show that you were referring to earlier when you were talking about some of the folks around Tracy. I had caught some of those shows early on, and I have a very close affinity to the Gulf breeze, because I lived very close to that part of the country when it had peaked. Some of it undoubtedly was military activity, and some of it was not. There's no doubt in my mind that it was not military activity in that area. There's a quite.
Well,
a
that
bit
whole
of,
area is surrounded by military
Right.
Installations.
Right, and an incredible amount of airborne activity all the time. And when I flew there, I looked constantly for stuff of a terrestrial, but cutting edge stuff that might be going on. Obviously, mostly flown at night, and of course, I always had my eye out for anything that would be outer world or extraterrestrial. No, nothing. I unfortunately never saw anything there. And that part of it. But give us a little interlude to what we're going to hear on this interview.
Okay, this excuse me. This is the first mini interview I did with Tracy, starting this series of Tracy Torme's Mad Hollywood Minute. Now, this is involved with Gene Roddenberry when Tracy came on board the brand new Star Trek show at that time. This was around 87, okay?
Right.
Star Trek The Next Generation. And at that time, Roddenberry was still in the catbird seat. Within several years, he had some reoccurring health problems. Roddenberry had some reoccurring health problems, exacerbated by some of his personal proclivities, something like that. but anyway, at this time, he took Torme under his wing. When Torme won the Peabody Award, Roddenberry went with him, flew back to New York to accept it. It was a very prestigious thing. And
Still is.
Oh, yes. And when they came back, one day, Gene Roddenberry, and Torme's going to tell you about this, came by, knocked on his door, and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you a minute." And Tracy said, "Well, yeah, sure." Well, he came in and he said, "I understand you're working with some of that UFO shit. Is that right?" And this is a very, very fascinating story. So, and when I was very close to Dwight Schultz, who played Lieutenant Barclay on Star Trek, and he was Howling Mad Murdoch on the A-Team. We were very close friends for about 12 years. I once asked him, because he had a very strong interest in this phenomena also. And I said, well, gee, people, especially these people on some of these science fiction shows that are running, God, aren't they at least interested in this field? And he said, the large majority of them, no, they think it's crap. And I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, oh, no. And I said, well, then why do we have all this entertainment about UFOs and extraterrestrials and all this other stuff? He said, Don, he said, look, if the day ever came when small paper bags filled with dog manure became a thing, Hollywood would be out there on the front line pushing these things, to and from. So, okay, so it's a buck thing. So anyway.
All right, I got to grab you because we're going to run out of time. I got to grab you there, Don. Folks, we're going to play the interview. We're going to go into our break. UAP Crossfire, Chris DiPerno, Martin Willis, Don Ecker, and your acting host tonight, Commander Cobra. We thank you for the first hour. Please enjoy this as we go into the break, and we'll see you on the flip side. We want to talk about octopuses in Iraq.
Is that what it is? Oh, okay. I thought it was jellyfish, but that's all right. All right, here we go.
I like jellyfish myself.
Okay.
The first one we're going to do tonight is...
We're going to talk about the strange similarity between some very prominent people who are very anti-UFO, and I think it will surprise many people as to who they are.
Okay, let's take it away. Now, you've been involved in UFO research, and you've been interested in it going all the way back to the early 1980s. Is that correct?
That's how old I am. That's true, yes.
Okay, you're 80?
Yeah, it feels like it sometimes.
Yeah, but going back to that period of time, well, first, before we start into the story, what was it that really, what case or incident really snapped you up that made you want to pursue this?
Well, when I was a little boy, really, my mother brought home a Look magazine that had been completely devoted to UFOs. And even at a very young age, I was absolutely fascinated by what I was reading, and I was looking at some of the pictures and thinking, if even one of these things is real, and then this is something that was made possibly on another planet by, non-human hands. And I didn't understand why that wouldn't be the most interesting thing in the world to everyone. To me, that was like, what could be more interesting than that? That's just incredible. So I've always been interested ever since then.
Okay, well now you as a longtime screenwriter and Hollywood producer, you've known tremendously powerful as well as many celebrities in the field, and for a long time I was very good friends with Dwight Schultz. And you know Dwight. Dwight was a part of the Star Trek family. Mm-hmm. It would seem to me that many of those folks would look kindly on this subject, but as I myself have discovered, that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, it's quite surprising. It's really not the case. Some of the most vocal skeptics are actually people that most people would assume would be pro-UFO, but they're not at all.
Well, let's start, Tracy, because you've had some tremendous stories that you've hit me with.
Well, I had two really great mentors to my writing career, and those were Joe Stefano, who was the screenwriter of Psycho, who created the wonderful show The Outer Limits, which is one of my all-time favorite shows. Maybe even my favorite show of all time. And Joe Stefano mentored me, but the other person that mentored me was Gene Roddenberry. And I'm sure most people know Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek. And he was very, very fatherly towards me. He sort of adopted me almost as a surrogate son. And he used to really take me under his wing. I remember when I was on the Paramount lot, he used to come over in a golf cart and tell me he wanted me to go for a ride with him, and I would get in the golf cart and he would drive me across the Paramount lot to the shooting stage, and he would tell me all these wonderful stories about Star Trek and how he created it and the various challenges that he went through. And sometimes he would talk to me about women. He would give me advice on women or just things about life or whatever. So I got very close with him, and like I said, he was sort of like a father or a grandfather type of figure to me. One day there was a knock at my office door, and it was him, and he said he wanted to talk to me about something. And I very quickly realized there was something going on because he had a very strange sort of intensity to him that day. I knew that something was up. He looked at me very probingly and got this very slow smile on his face, but it wasn't a smile of joy or anything like that. And I'm trying to figure out in my own head what this is about. He said, "It's come to my attention that you are considering doing a movie about Travis Walton." And I remember being surprised that
and
he
of course
knew Travis.
This was the Fire in the Sky movie, right?
It was eventually going to be, yes. But he had heard that I was in the early stages of looking into doing that as a movie. I don't even know where he heard that, but I was very surprised that he even knew who Travis Walton was. When he said that, I thought, wow, that's interesting. So I said, yes, Gene, that's true. I am thinking of doing that. And he absolutely, exploded. He said, "Don't you know that these things are all absolute bullshit?" And then he said, "They're only seen at 3 a.m. by a drunken farmer. They're never seen by pilots. They're never seen by astronomers. There's absolutely nothing to it. How in the world can you believe something so ridiculous?" And he was all red-faced and really worked up. And so I very, calmly and carefully said, "Gene, I don't mean to contradict you, but you are really wrong. Those facts that you're throwing out, they're just not right. They're wrong. You've been really misinformed." Well, it didn't go very far from there, because he just was looking at me as if I had said I believe in Santa Claus. That was his attitude. Like, he could not comprehend not only that I would believe in such a thing, but that I would spend my precious time working on something like that. He thought that was terrible. He really was upset. And so that was the first of several similar experiences that I had over the years. And the ones that really pop into my mind the most would be Carl Sagan, Seth Shostak, and Ray Bradbury. And those are three people who, again, at a certain point later on in my life, I had a one-on-one moment with each of them, where they each expressed in various ways, but kind of similar ways, what a terribly stupid and fictional subject UFOs were.
Well, Tracy, now speaking of Carl Sagan, now you, of course, were very close friends with Bud Hopkins, were you not?
Yes, I certainly was.
I can remember speaking to Bud about Carl Sagan, and it was my understanding from Bud that Sagan at one point had told Bud Hopkins that if you ever have a case that you feel is airtight, that I will take a look at it. Now, of course, I'm shortening much of this, and I'm paraphrasing, but Bud said later that he had a case that he attempted on several occasions to take to Sagan, and Sagan basically blew him off.
Yeah. I worked a little bit on the movie Contact, and it was then that I actually met Carl Sagan. And actually, I did spend more time with his son than with him. And it's interesting because his son, if your audience can imagine this, imagine sort of a punk rock version of Carl Sagan. That's what his son was like. He had a real punk haircut, but he looked just like his father. So that was something I remember that was kind of funny. But yeah, I tried to talk to him about the subject and tried to open him up to, again, my feeling that these people that are so against the subject really don't usually understand the subject. Look at what Gene Roddenberry said to me. Gene Roddenberry was a long-time pilot. Okay, he was a pilot as a career long before he was a writer. So for him to say that pilots never see these things, you and I both know probably someone like Richard Haynes is somebody who all he does is pilot cases.
Exactly, exactly.
So it's so erroneous. It's completely fictional. It's completely wrong.
Well, Gene Roddenberry flew B-17s during the Second World War, didn't he?
I think so, yes.
And
he was shot down, in fact, at one time.
Right, and
yeah.
During the latter part of the war, especially above Europe, pilots were encountering what came to be known as Foo Fighters almost continuously from October of 44 through about February or March of 45.
And the whole point sort of my take on this entire thing is it's not just that these people don't believe in the subject. They certainly have the right to not believe in it. And I'm sure there's, great majority of people probably that don't believe in it. But it's the fact that there are reasons for not believing it. Or in each of these cases, including Ray Bradbury's another example, they just were extremely badly misinformed. They believe certain quote-unquote facts about the subject that are incorrect. So I found that kind of fascinating.
Okay, well, that was Really appreciated, Tracy. I want to thank you for joining us again tonight. We're going to do this again very soon, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to do a few of these, and it's fun for me to go down memory lane. I appreciate the opportunity, Don. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure. Okay. Well, we will talk to you next time, Tracy, and once again, thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now I have Mr. Tracy Torme.
Well, gentlemen, I love that interview. I think
that was great.
Don, you have some absolute incredible history, and thanks for sharing. And I happen to be reading a book about one of the gentlemen he mentioned, Mr. DeStefano, who was a producer and brought up The Outer Limits, the original series. Tracy and I are about the same age, so I'm sure he watched it quite a bit in syndication growing up as I did. Another fantastic story behind the story. Well, folks, we're up against our first break. This is UAP Crossfire for Chris, Martin, and Don. Hopefully you'll see us on the backside. We're going to pick up the jellyfish UFO incident circa 2009, but it has a lot of interesting. Bless you, sir. We have a lot of interesting play that's making the rounds. And we look forward to seeing you on the flip. Don't go away. And please continue to support KGRA Radio DB. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to UAP Crossfire on KGR Radio DB. I am with Chris Colonel, Martin Willis, and Don Ecker, my very esteemed and learned co-hosts. We had a really, I think, wonderfully in-depth and, as always, very detailed discussion on Tracy Torme. Interesting character, and obviously my co-hosts had a lot of insights. And thank you, Don, for sharing your personal connection and a little bit of what went on. For folks that just are coming in on that second hour, Monday evening, 7 o'clock East Coast time, 4 p.m. West Coast time, we're going to be doing a visit on Don's show, Dark Matters Radio, on KGRA Radio, of course. And we're going to have another kind of retrospective of 23 and maybe some of the things we're discussing tonight, because I have a couple of things I'm going to pose to my co-host tonight that we may get to that will carry over into Monday night. And please join us a week from tonight. We have a special guest that's going to be joining us, one of my favorite people on the planet. And as always, I always like to say hello to what I consider the greatest audience on the planet. Thank you for tuning in. Now, Martin, you got the kind of lead on this because you hit me up with it pretty early today, and it was fun chatting with you when I was on base, and you were catching me between meetings with lots of interesting texts as we were getting ready. The best part is when you asked me, "Are you not in communication with me until the show?" Is that what you're telling me? I just don't have access to my personal email when I'm on base. I'd love to tell you that it's grays and large white Nordics ETs that are entertaining me. It's nothing that exciting. It's much more mundane, trying to get older airplanes in the military to work when I'm on the other side of the job. But let's start talking about the jellyfish. And I've seen some of this in the past. I have a little bit of commentary, but you've taken the lead on this one. You open this up a little bit, please.
Well, I wish first of all, your screen is frozen, I believe. Either that or that's just a still shot. I'm not sure what's going on there, but
no, I am seeing myself move here. But from Maine, I probably didn't pay the squirrels off enough to run the generator to make the internet be fully functional where I'm at up here. So
yeah. Well, I guess it was 2 days ago now, I believe. A video was released by Jeremy Corbell, and all of a sudden I get way too many emails anyway. I do appreciate, though, people, reaching out to me and trying to alert me. But everybody, I must have had 20 or so emails about this jellyfish UAP. And I believe that Jeremy has recently changed it to chandelier UAP, I believe. something like that. Maybe the jellyfish, I don't know, maybe he was getting some grief about it. I've been always curious why or how Jeremy gets these cell phone leaked videos of screens. That's very, and Commander, you and I had a couple of texts back and forth about that. You're saying it's more or less lax, but it's a very interesting UFO, I have to say. And Mark D'Antonio, I would say he was on last week. And he and I were going back and forth quite a bit about this. I don't think, for as much analyzation that he does of UFO videos and things like this, I don't think he could crack this thing, exactly what it was. And I said to him, well, it's so still the way, nothing moves at all. And I said, don't you find that really weird? And he says, no, it could be a column of air. And in a column of air, nothing would move. Right. And then some people, or I watched quickly this afternoon, Ben Hansen was talking about this on News Nation. And the question was posed to him, is this a jetpack? And he thought that could be a possibility at first, but then he kind of ruled that out by some of the work he was doing. So 2 good people I know are working on this. And as far as I know, they don't have it cracked yet. And it's the clip I'm going to play is supposed to be the full clip of it. And supposedly this thing went underwater by eyewitnesses, went underwater for 17 minutes. They also said the people that were on location in Iraq where this was said that there was no sound when this thing was going over. So that would more or less rule out, or it would rule out jetpacks in that case, if you take that at face value.
Well, I have a question. I have a question. And this is something, especially right now, that our forces in Iraq for months now have been under continuous attack. Okay? Missiles, right. Drones, you name it. We've had people that, thankfully, up to this point, I have not heard of anybody dying, but we have had people hurt. Now, if they have something like this mysterious in the sky, gentlemen, I find it highly curious that there were not attempts to take this thing down.
Well, this was 2018 done.
2009 done. So this
2009?
Yeah,
okay.
I have 2009 as a reference when I was looking at it.
Okay, I thought it was 2018, but anyway, we're going to run it, and it's 2 minutes long, and we'll see what you guys think after. There's a little background noise to this video. Here we go. There it is. And, it looks translucent at times. I guess there's a heat signature off and on.
Well,
I don't know what it is.
let me jump in real quick.
Can I comment on
Chris,
comment on this real quick? You flying over a U.S. joint military base and nobody takes a shot at this thing? You have radar there. You have guns.
It didn't show up on radar.
People probably seen it. I mean, it's daylight, right?
No, it's not daylight. That's night. That is at night.
That is at night. Okay, even at night, it doesn't show up on radar. Somehow or another, I just find it odd that this thing's flying across a U.S. military base and nobody even takes a shot at it. I mean,
since I spent a large time of my life doing this exact kind of work, let me give you a quick couple of impressions that I see when I look at that screen. It's a night IR, and the reason that the colors are changing on the object underneath the reticle there is that in that particular part, white is, I assuming, is hot looking at that. So depending on how that objective is looking at it, when its temperature is different than the background, it's going to change from a white to a day. If you looked at it in a couple spots, you could tell that it was showing as a lighter color. So that's pretty normal for an IR type. Its movement looks like almost, and I'm not saying this is what it is, but it's moving like a balloon. What I can't quite figure out, Martin, I'm almost positive that video was probably shot in some kind of control center on a download screen from whatever is in the air taking that picture. I suspect, just based on some of the noise, that it's probably a helostat sensor, meaning it's a balloon that they had up in the bases for protection. And then because balloons are very quiet, that it's a blimp looking like device. And underneath it, it'll have radar and or IR sensors, like the same kind of things that I flew in my aircraft. So when you look at a picture like this, its relative temperature to the background is cooler. And I'm pretty sure this is a white is hot. So anything that you see dark, and you can reverse that. A lot of times we would reverse it because you want to see if you get a different quality on it. By reversing it, making black is hot and then white is the cool temperatures. And you can sometimes get different features off of it. It's very interesting. It's obvious if you looked, you could see a couple soldiers or at least personnel walking inside one of the walled off portions of the compound. And they don't seem to react to it, which is not surprising. Believe it or not, if there's no light available, unless you saw or heard something that was generating some kind of a light signal, you really wouldn't see it. And it's pretty noisy in different parts of the FOBs because you're usually generating power and doing all that kind of stuff. So if it's quiet, it doesn't look like any drone I have ever seen. I've never seen anything that would be that. Absolutely not a jetpack unless there's something really interesting going on with propulsion, just the way that thing is rigged up. But it looked like, to me, it's moving with an air current. And the way that it was coming off, I think it was probably a heliostat coming off that.
I didn't get from Mark whether he thought that was a balloon or not. So, I don't know where this stands with a lot of people that are taking a serious look at this. But for the most part, I don't believe they're talking that they think it's a balloon, but I haven't heard the latest in the last few hours. So I have no idea if they've come to more of a conclusion on that.
Martin, we're positive this didn't show up on any radar or anything?
Well, that's only according to, I believe, now this is secondhand. Someone wrote me that Jeremy Corbell, I didn't hear him say it, but he says that it didn't show up on radar.
Okay.
Well, if this thing is from either 2009 or 2018, right. Where the hell's it been?
It just leaked now. So, I mean, maybe it was classified, possibly.
From where?
Well, I'm pretty sure, Don, somebody took out a phone.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And they were in a facility and they made a recording.
Yeah. And that's where Jeremy gets those videos. The other one that he had of that, the Chinese drone, supposedly, that triangular thing, and also of that object that went into the water off of the Michigan. I think it was the USS Michigan or one of those. I can't remember the name of it. Missouri. I can't remember the name of the ship. But that one also was. These are all cell phone videos that somehow I think he's got an inside to someone that's leaking these out to him. I'm not really sure exactly who's doing it and how he gets them.
You know,
Yeah, Chris. Now, you were asking some questions when we were prepping for the show. I want you to put that detective hat back on and throw some of that back out here into the discussion.
Well, first of all, the video that I'm thinking back of the cube that was seen in Iraq. I mean, I'm looking at the background. I'm saying, wow, the background of this thing floating is very similar to the background of what that cube was filmed at. Now, if that cube was also a military base, I would have to say, you know, once maybe they get by surprise, but after that, if something else is flying over it, and if it's not ours, we're going to take it down. I mean, Commander, you've been on enough bases. Don, you've been on enough bases. I've been on enough bases to know that somebody says along well, if this thing flies over again, we don't know what it is, somebody take it down. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, you can't have unidentified objects flying over military bases.
If you're seeing them,
we don't know what it is.
The square. I can't talk to the cube that you're talking to, Chris. But in this particular video, those are pretty much standard shoes, consolidated housing unit type buildings. Yeah. You know, that's what you're seeing in the background there, plus the connexes and the other stuff that's there that, you know, people cobble together from everything from supply to making workspaces and workshops out.
And if I think you go back to the cube that was seen flying in Iraq I believe over the military bases, same type of camera. I mean, the same type of black and infrared camera that was there. Same type of buildings, from what I believe. I'm going by memory now, and you know, except the cube was much faster. It was speeding right along, and there was no sound to that either. I'm suspicious of this being an actual UFO and not maybe something of man-made object. That's my opinion.
Let me just give you the reason that you're seeing the IR and it didn't show up in night vision. I just saw that comment come up. Night vision requires photon activity. It's literally using the reflected light from stars and other celestial bodies in the sky, that it's in the optic range, and then it magnifies it and it shoots it against a phosphorus screen, and you're seeing what is projecting, what's catching those photons that are being magnified on the photon screen. That's how it makes a picture. IR
or infrared.
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting to, Don. This is IR. You don't use night vision technology generally in sensors. You use IR, and then when you have enough available light, you use the electro-optical side. That's how they house the two units together. So that's what I was trying to explain earlier about the background color. The operator that is going to set a capability with that, so that whatever's the hottest is going to show white or black, and then it works into a grayscale to the opposite side, and you switch back and forth at will to see it. So to me, it doesn't surprise me that it's not metallic, most likely, or it somehow has a stealthy characteristic. But remember, radar doesn't usually condense around a facility. It condenses usually around airfields, and then you have defensive batteries around, and not that many defensive missile battery activity in Iraq these days, even when I was there, because we just didn't have that kind of a threat. We weren't seeing that. As of late, obviously, we have a lot more going on. Now, what we did have that's very interesting, and I would love to know exactly where this is at, there was, because of the types of mortars and other rockets being fired into the base, we had very small localized radars that actually would warn you to take cover. We called it big voice or giant voice would come on. It would warn you that there was incoming. That's like literally what it would say across the base: incoming, incoming, incoming. And then when you were near where it was going to impact, those speakers would say, take cover immediately. It was just an automated system.
Wow.
Scare the bejesus out of you when you heard the second message, take cover, because you knew it was there. I spent a very interesting 20 minutes on the ground next to 5 or 6 donkeys that were in a facility where we were raising the donkeys. They were standing there looking at me as I'm powering at their feet for one of those attacks. That would have picked it up if it had the returns. That is a very interesting object. Martin, would you mind popping up the picture of something similar that's a comparison that I sent you a little bit earlier that occurred in Turkey? So this is something that was spotted in Turkey. I don't have the date on it, but it obviously has a similar kind of. Now, the picture on the right is the one in Turkey, and that is electrically optic. That is using available daylight to show the picture. And it reports to have a similar kind of conduct and flying characteristic as what you're seeing on the Iraq quote unquote jellyfish.
If I may,
I find it fascinating that there's always UFO activity in wartime. It is, to me, a fascinating subject. Mac Maloney, who has a show on KGRA, has written a couple outstanding books just categorizing all the fairly modern, probably since the 19th century, UFO events during wartime. Absolutely fascinating stuff that goes on.
You know, one of the people in chat put up a great comment. I'd like to put it up if I could. He says to me that one of the intel guys said it took no threat posture. And you are correct about that, Android Paranormal. It didn't take a threat posture. However, that doesn't mean that we're not going to try to take it down to see what it is. Even though it didn't take a threat posture. Remember when we had the Chinese balloon flying over, it really didn't cause a threat. It was collecting intelligence. We took it down. Okay. So to have these objects fly over, and we don't know how many times these objects have flown over military bases, sooner or later, we're going to want to take one of them down to see what it is, or try to take one of them down.
What I would like to know is if anyone on the ground actually physically saw the thing.
Right.
Because, Mick West always chimes in on these things. And he's saying that it was a light diffraction in the camera or something along those lines.
That sure doesn't look like it to me. And IR is not looking at light; it's looking at heat. So you're not going to get photon light bending showing up on IR. That will not happen.
Yeah.
How about a drone? What do you think of a drone, Commander?
Well, it's interesting if it is, because if it is a drone, then that would mean it's probably some kind of balloon type technology, which has been around for centuries, as a reconnaissance device. I don't know what it's doing because I don't see anything underneath it. Could it be something that's shredded or, was up at higher altitudes, and now this is just the remnants of something that was maybe multiple type balloons burst, and this is the part coming out? I mean, I have seen weather balloons that use multiple balloon systems with like a sensor on the bottom of it that takes temperature and atmospheric pressure, and rate is that's what a lot of weather forecasting meteorologists use that information to come up with where the air mass is moving. And they let thousands and thousands of balloons every day, and then when it goes to a certain altitude, they normally burst, and then they crash to the earth, and they generally don't cause too much trouble. And they're small enough and light enough that they're not missiles when they come back down. So that could be a pretty easy explanation, but it's in such a weird configuration that I can't imagine what it does on that. Why would you have to be configured that way that you can't make any kind of, easy comparison? And then, of course, you have another one in that general region. Turkey's not that far from where this was reported to be seen. To me, it's an interesting case, And then you have the whole other layer of this. Why, as Don said, 2009 or 2018, so long to come forward. I saw a lot of the interesting remarks in the chat about the poster. I like when people put this stuff up. That screenshot to me looks like a facility where that was being transmitted down to either a control cab for what I was talking about, the heliostat or aerostat system. And they were around lots of bases. They're fantastic defensive weapons because they can, or excuse me, defensive sensors because they can fly because they're just helium and they can stay when they're tethered to the base. They're tethered to that. And it looks like that's how they recorded it. Or it was being beamed from an aircraft that was out doing work in the area, spotted it. You'll also notice that was manually being driven. You notice how the little cross, the pipper that they're using is leading it a little bit because they can't get the automated part of the system to lock onto it. There are features that when you get something into the screen, that reticle, and anywhere near the reticle, it generally will have what they call track by follow, and it'll pick it up. So it was obviously having a hard time doing that. So someone had to manually kind of bounce that along, and that's why it's leading it a little bit. Yes, Chris.
Now, I got another question for you, Commander, because I'm on the fence with this thing. The shots were always from above,
right?
So nobody's taking pictures from the ground at this thing. They're always from a certain angle from above. You know,
I don't think anybody on the ground was actually seeing it.
What's that?
Right.
So
I was going to say, go ahead.
I'm just trying to figure out if you look at the cube and you look at the way this one was filmed, they're filmed in almost the same exact way. You know, from above at a certain angle, leading forward to it. I mean, I'm just putting my investigator hat on and trying to say, okay, how is this being filmed? It's not being filmed from a plane, right?
It could be. So my best guess, if you look if you took like a child's balloon at a that you get at the supermarket, right? It's got the string and the balloons on it. Okay, if you think of that in large scale, and this is definitely looking down on it. If it's the aerostat is tethered to the ground within the perimeter of the base, usually towards like one of the sides. And there's a sensor that picks this up and sees this thing flying by. I would suggest looking at that, best guess, this thing is someplace between 100 feet and 50 feet above the ground as it's drifting by or moving. I would even say drift. That's a bad conjecture on my part. As it's moving, and it's moving fairly slowly. Why I think it might be an aerostat is that the way it's holding it in moving, it's not picking it up with any kind of automated system to track it. So someone's seen this and they're moving around. If it's an aircraft, what's happening with the aircraft, it's orbiting around it. That doesn't look like an orbit the way the background is moving.
Right.
If it's an orbit, we would have seen the other side of this, and we would have seen the ground moving in a circular kind of pattern around the target. Yes, Chris.
All right. So let me ask you this, Commander. If it's an aerostat, would an aerostat be manned on the base? Would somebody be?
Yes, absolutely. So the sensor's up on the balloon, and they're down below inside a command cab.
Okay, so somebody in that command had to see this thing.
Absolutely.
That be
and the reason they're there is to defend the base, to make sure no one's approaching the base, that you don't have somebody coming up close to set up mortars or do something. Correct.
Okay, and so when you have this, go ahead, Martin.
Well, we're all missing the point here. If we're taking things at face value of what the witnesses supposedly said, that this thing went inside of a lake, some type of body of water, for 17 minutes, and when it rose out of the lake, it shot off so fast they couldn't even track it. Now that part, I don't know if you are familiar with.
I read that part, but I didn't see it, and that's the part I would like to see. That part of the video.
Me too. I guess I'd like to just break this down. I'm not saying it's not real. It's definitely real.
Oh no, there's something really there.
You're right. We're all in agreement of that. I'm just trying to figure out if this thing is being watched by somebody in a command post and they say, hey, I don't know what this is. It's not ours. and it's flying across a U.S. military base, there's no action. There's no spotlights on it. There's nothing that shows that there's any reaction.
I know, Chris, but you got to understand the way this is set up. They don't have spotlights. You don't light up the base at night because you want minimal lighting because you don't want anybody taking a pot shot on the base.
You're correct.
So I know why you're saying, but what I'm trying to get at is you never want to fire rounds at something that you don't know what it is unless you're in a clear posture. And I don't see anything in that short clip. Those two people walking are not walking like you're in a status of attack or get into a defensive posture. You see those two folks walking in the background. So it doesn't surprise me.
For whatever it's worth. Yeah, for whatever it's worth, I don't get the feeling that this is necessarily exotic material. If I had to bet
You're talking
a buck,
about the object, right?
The object, correct.
Right.
If I had to bet a buck, it's somebody's manufactured drone. That's the feeling I get. It's some type of drone. Weird? Absolutely. Strange? Never saw anything like it before. But UAP unidentified for sure, but not ET. It's somebody's junk.
Or purposeful.
That's my opinion.
So, Martin, based on what we've seen on that part of it, now let's talk about the rest of the report you were talking about. The part where it submerges and comes up. It has almost a tic tac kind of part to it. What it was supposed to.
It does. It does in the fact that, actually, I think we're going to get Mark in here.
Oh, excellent.
He's taken a really good look at this. So let me just, I'm just trying to send him an email right now. And it would be great to hear his perspective of it. And as far as what I understand, that this thing just, after it came up from the water, which it was in for 17 minutes. And I'm not sure how all this is logged, and perhaps Mark can let us know. He's really been doing work on this for a couple of days. So anyway, I'm just trying to send this off to him, and hopefully he will get it, and we'll see him in here in a minute.
Mark, you said this thing dived in the water for 17 minutes, right? Witnesses seen that.
Yeah,
right?
Yes. Yeah.
But nobody took any photo or video of.
Well, there is other video of it at a long distance heading toward this body of water. So, and it is a video, and you can see it looks really, really teeny, and it's really hard to understand exactly what it is, but it is heading toward that body of water, and then they don't show it.
Which I find really interesting because there isn't too many bodies of water in Iraq.
Yeah.
There's the two major rivers. There is a body of water up by Mosul, not one of the places that I used to hang my hat years back, which is behind a large dam where the possibility. So I'd be interested to try to figure out where it is.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I'm trying to get Mark in here. I just sent that, and he has looked into this for a couple of days, but I don't really know. I mean, I think it would be kind of silly if we're spending all this time on something that means absolutely nothing. But you don't know. I mean, it is intriguing, and we did see Ben Hansen today talk about the possibility of it being a drone. And he said, he may be able to create something like that, but why would someone do that in Iraq? For what purpose would they do all this type of work for such a strange looking thing? And maybe that's part of it. But if it doesn't show up, wouldn't a drone show up on radar and also night vision?
Unless it was really small, and if it's a drone that's using a large balloon type, flight device is how you're trying to get this thing to move. Probably not. I mean, it's small enough that whatever is metallic or whatever has got structure to it, which is hard to see, from the angle, if there is something in there with all that stuff hanging down. it looks partially shredded to me, like something else has occurred with it.
Well, there was. Oh, good. Look who we got here. He's got his glasses.
Oh, look what he's wearing. More eyewear shows up.
Are we going to have to put those on now? Oh no!
I think the commander had asked that everybody wear them.
Well, we started the
Why
show,
not?
Mark. Yes, that's correct.
Oh, did you already do it?
Here we go. Yeah.
Oh, look
But
at
keep
that.
yours on. You look like those glasses were made for you, dude.
Hey, Don, look at Don. How you feeling, Don?
A little better, not 100% yet, but you know.
Okay. Well, thanks for the invite, guys. And I know you just need a couple seconds here, so I'm happy to oblige.
Oh, give us more than a couple seconds. I got the glasses on it, and the audience just loves when we're all wearing these glasses. The reaction is
They're humoring us. That's all. They're just humoring us.
How do I know you have the glasses on? I can't see you.
I'm sorry that for some reason my picture is freezing up.
Okay. Yeah, no, I have to say that, I looked at that jellyfish video. I assume that's what you wanted to talk about.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And a couple things. Now, first of all, my first thought looking at it was, I want to see if it tracks across the screen and moves across the screen. However, throughout the video, there's some zoomed in sections of it. So you're not seeing the full frame until one point where you see it from a distance and it's moving to the right, on the right side of the frame over here, and then moving away. And so to me, I've got this problem with my all sky camera out there in Arizona at the observatory right now. There's bird poop on the dome, and it looks like bird poop, when you see it in silhouette. So is it possible that a bird or some other debris left some residue on the face of the camera? Yes, and it will, depending on the camera, look like it's somewhat in focus. I mean, it's not going to be a blurry blob. It may actually be somewhat in focus. So I know that Jeremy took this and ran with it, but I wish that he might have said something about it so that I could have at least weighed in and told them that I think it's possible that you're looking at some debris on the actual, camera cover or whatever. And I'm still looking at it, Yeah, see now that.
But Mark, don't they focus in and out? Don't you see this like it's at a distance and then it shows up again? And then there's other videos as it's going over toward the water where it's a real tiny little thing and moving along.
Yeah, but in this image here, okay, that you just had up there, the one on the right, that's a zoomed image, and the one on the left is a zoomed image. You're not seeing the full frame there. So when you see the full frame, this might just be a small spot on the frame, but for the video, they're actually zooming into sections to show you this thing. It's hard to know what we're looking at. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but it certainly is plausible that this is just some schmutz on the cover of the lens, and
how would it appear to be moving? Is that the drone or whatever it is
yes,
that it's being filmed from moving?
That's correct. And so it's kind of clever, when you show the full frame, you actually see that it's sort of stuck in one position relative to the rest of the frame. Now there's a couple scenes where you see kind of drifting into the frame. You say, oh, is it actually moving? No, that's zoomed in. And within the full frame of the image, they're zooming and moving a section of that video. So you can actually see that it looks like it's moving relative to the background on its own. But I think it's actually locked to the frame. And when you see it in the full frame view, there's a few seconds where it's full frame. It's in one spot. And I think that's where it stays. So I don't know. I don't buy that this is a floating object over a town at all. If
Mark,
it is, yes.
Mark, how about this? I'm convinced this is from an aerostat just by looking at thousands of hours of flying and looking at sensors.
Yeah,
just the way it looks to me, it looks like it's coming from something that's down below an aerostat. The way what I think it looks like it's moving like it's in a drift, and from a stationary object. And the way I haven't seen the other part that Martin talked about, And I'm sorry you guys can't see me moving. I'm making fantastic hand gestures because every pilot, when they start to talk like this, it moves their hands in a way where one hand appears to be shooting the other hand down. The really good ones, your wristwatch catches on fire. That's how you know. There you go. Thank you, Mark, for doing what I can't provide. The
helping
audio.
you out.
Thank you for being my stunt hands tonight on UAP Crossfire. That's how I look at this, because there is one part where you see people walking in the background.
I saw that.
And how it continues to seem to move. And that's a pretty good reference line for that very short time you see them moving. That's the conclusion I had. It doesn't surprise me that it doesn't show up on radar. That's another report on this. But it's interesting that you're kind of going down the line that it could just be the smut factor that gets on there, which was a big deal for us flying the airplane. If you got it on there, there was no way to clean it off. So you couldn't get your hand onto the sensor. So you really try to protect the sensor if you got into any kind of moisture or anything else.
There have been cases in the past where there were schmutz on the sensor, but once you're airborne, you got to live with it. Right. Unless you're going to go back and land and get out there and say, clean that damn thing off now. Yep. How could you fly like that? That kind of thing. It could have happened while they were airborne too, which kind of, if you look at it, it's like a splat. So it could literally be a bug splat too.
I don't see an impact kind of thing on there.
Well, it's trailing down below.
I've killed many thousands of insects on windscreens over many years of flying. It doesn't have that look to it, but you're right. Could have that downward kind of dripping kind of effect as well.
Yeah, the windscreen different than I think the IR pod. The IR pod might have a different.
It usually have a flat edge to it normally.
Yes, and right, but it may be angled at a different angle, so it could be a direct impact or a slanting impact. Who knows? See, we don't know any of the details here. And obviously,
Mark, we probably should tell the audience, your background, because nobody, some of the people listening have no idea who's this guy. But you actually are a video and photo analyst for MUFON.
Yeah, I'm the chief photo and video analyst. I'm an astronomer. This is what we look like. So I bring the science bent right into things.
So you took your alien eyes off to hide your identity. Is that it?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, I found a better picture of this thing anyway. So.
Oh yeah, there you go.
There it is. Yep, there it is. Yep.
Snuffleupagus from space.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh boy.
But so do you feel like it's inconclusive? Is that what you would say at this point, Mark?
Oh, at this point, there's so many variables. I mean, as Commander said very rightly, the windscreen. What's the windscreen shape? What's the angle to the flight path? Is it angled downward? Is it something that moves, like on the Raytheon FLIR AT FLIR pod? Okay, is it something that will articulate and move? And is it something that took a hit while it was in flight, or was it something on the ground? We don't know that. Was it even something on the windscreen? And that's the other thing too, is like, no one shows pictures of the IR pod to know what they're looking at, what kind it is, which one it is, so I have no idea, in fact, what we're looking at. Commander's comment that it could be, you suggest it could be part of the payload or the lines of an aerostat. Okay. I've seen aerostats and sure, maybe it could be something along the way, but I would think that the craft would have passed that. The aircraft, the drone might have passed that if it was in motion, because they're moving along the ground. Then this thing, it's being seen down. Okay. So to me, it's either something superimposed between the camera and the ground, but like on the camera lens, it's the old bug on the lens thing. But, these cameras aren't just the sensor with that's it. They're a sensor, there's filters, the IR sensor is in there, and then you've got a housing, and then the housing, there's glass. Okay. That's a proper material for infrared to get through, usually quartz or whatever. And so when
optically balanced neutral.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it has to allow infrared to get through it because infrared won't go through regular glass. So that's why like FLIRs. I have a FLIR drone here that I made. I got a FLIR Tau 2 core. It's called. It's a little camera this big, and I cannibalized it and I put it on a gyroscopically stabilized gimbal that I could put on a drone, so I could fly it and find lost children or whatever with it. And so that works very well. But they all have their little idiosyncrasies, and I don't know. You don't even know whether they're. I mean, it looks like they're shooting black for hot in this one. You don't know the time of day. I didn't know the time of day. If there's something in the statement, that's fine. I didn't hear it. So what happened is they put this video out there. Everybody just absorbs it and says, "Ooh, that's an alien," without any critical thinking to say, "Well, wait a minute. Shouldn't we find out the provenance of this information? Shouldn't we find out what the aircraft was, what the FLIR system was, why they were flying, and what they were looking at, if that's available? Was it a border IR system, a flying border drone or something?" I've offered my IR drones to the folks at the border to try and allow them to see illegal crossers and things like that. So I don't know. Then
see the question down below, Mark?
Yeah. If it isn't a lens, it raises the question what the camera's following. Well, that's the thing. The camera might have actually, if it's on the lens, the camera can't follow it. It's a systemic problem inside, in the system. So whatever they're looking at, that thing's just going to be in the view, no matter what they do. And if that's what it was, then that the guy running the IR is going, crap, man, frick, I didn't clean the damn, that kind of thing.
Let me ask you this, Mark. In the center of the picture, you see the little tracking part.
Yeah.
So can the tracking part, can that move separate from the lens?
Depends on the IR. I've seen that they can actually move to actually track something, okay, or they can be a central reticle for reference. So I don't know what the IR system is. I don't know what
Martin, the way that's presented, if you were to overlay that cross onto the object, whatever it is, then if you have the feature that Mark's talking about, you actually kind of a cube, a square shows up and surrounds it, and that tells the software that's studying it, I want you to keep this optical target in the center of the screen, and then the gyros, the software drives it at that point to keep it centered. You'll see it kind of drift around a little bit as the heat source changes its density against the background. So if it's approaching something that's close to what the temperature looks like in the background, it'll drift a little bit, but they're pretty good. And you can set the size of that square. So that is probably the reticle that you're seeing there is probably like what we would call it, either the dead eye or the straight on target line. And then if you can get that, then you have to manipulate some other gear to change some of it. I don't think you're seeing the actual screen of the operator. I think you're seeing like a large monitor that someone's watching. And the reason I'm intrigued by this, Mark, is you're drawing a different conclusion than I am. When I see this and I see how they're moving around the base, and now you got me thinking of a couple of different things. It to me appears that they are trying to track this thing, but they can't get it enough heat, enough differential IR reference to get anything to lock up on it. And
maybe, but this target is if it's black for hot, which it appears to be, or then this object should stand out like a sore thumb. There's only a few points in the video where it looks like it fades a little bit, and I'm not sure why that is, but I do know that in my systems, when I fly my drone with the IR, sometimes I do get the hot objects fading and ghosting in and out. Sometimes that's a effect with the IR camera. I don't know directly what can cause it in the case that we're looking at here, but I do know it can happen. But I'm not saying that is what happened. I'm just saying that in looking at this guy, and you might be right, too, Commander. It could be a part of the tether line of an aerostat, or something. But I will say that I'm definitely not convinced it's something flying through the air. Okay, I'm just not. I know that. Again, like I said, if this is the full frame that you see here with my frame with my face in here, you're seeing a piece.
It's a
like
fine
this.
looking face. I like to add as well.
Well, I need to put those glasses on you sent me. Okay. He sent all of us. Amazing guy, that guy. So, but if you look at that frame, right, but if you look now, this is what you're seeing. You're seeing a close up, and they're moving around within that frame to show you a different aspect. And as they move across the frame, all right, remember the whole frame is here. This is just an inset, and they're moving that, and it gives the illusion, I think, that this object is moving. All right. And I don't believe that it's moving on the main frame. Now, if there's more data, I'd love to see it. I'd
Mark,
love to change my opinion.
All right,
Chris,
Mark.
is Chris
another
trying to
thing.
talk?
Oh, sorry, Chris. Chris, your mic's off.
You've been
But
muted for like
since
10
you're
minutes.
since you're talking with a muted mic, Chris, I'll take over for
There
a
you
second.
Buddy, it's not a word here.
They would know, first of all, Mark, if this was something on the lens, they'd simply know and clean the lens, right? I mean, the next day when the thing is landed or whatever it is, they would clean the lens. So they'd say, well, this video is nothing, so because there's something on the lens.
Yeah, but see, you're compressing the time, I think, too, because this is something that they said that Jeremy said was snuck out of the wherever it came from. And so if it was something that was on the lens, this could have been footage shot a year ago. We don't know.
Martin, you said that there was a witness, and this witness said it went into the water, correct?
There was more than there was witnesses. This is all. I mean, I don't have any facts to this, but this is what is part of this story supposedly. And it went in the water for 17 minutes and came out really fast.
Yeah, that's the supposedly part is what gets me. And because how these stories get legs, and next thing you know, we have 9-foot aliens in Las Vegas.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You're it. And I like I said earlier, I've looked at this thing now for quite a while, and I got to say, I get no feeling whatsoever that it's exotic. I think this is a drone of some type. It's strange. Who built it? Who knows? What it did? Strange. I mean, it apparently flew over an FOB, right? A forward operating base. Is that correct?
That's kind of the report, Don.
Yeah. So, and hey, I was a cop. Chris was a cop. We know how stories can grow and change.
Oh, yeah.
And what are you dealing with? You're dealing with a contingent of people that have one mantra. I want to believe.
At all costs.
If I learned anything in 35 plus years, I've learned that.
I want to grab, Don, I completely agree. I want to grab something on the show here because it's going to carry over. And now that Mark's here, I think it's going to be fun. We've got about 5-6 minutes. Here's the question I'm going to pose. We're not going to get a chance to really get answers. Maybe we can pick a little bit up on Don's show. Mark, make sure you tune in on Dark Matters on Monday. We're going to do the reverse of you not being on the show. We're going to do a retrospect of 2023 that we did with you last week, but we're going to have Don. So Don will be Mark. Mark will be watching Don be him on the show next week. Now, here's the question I want to pose.
Did you get that, Don? You figured that out?
I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
Some people keep up with me, others can't. Okay.
Yes.
That's why I live in Maine and you live in Connecticut, dude. That's how this is working out. I want each of you to consider what your prediction for 2024 is in UAP and in this kind of discussion we've been having. So while you're thinking about that for a couple seconds, and like I said, we'll probably really discuss it. I'll tell you why I enjoyed this analysis and talking about this particular piece of it. Obviously, the Corbell mantra has a certain je ne sais quoi to it that people are going to say this is good or this is not such a good quality source. I like when you get everyone looking at it and saying what's happening, why is it delayed, how did it go. There's a nice elements to all of this because you have a group of people that really do want it to happen. And when you take a really what I would call the old school scientific approach to kind of breaking it down, going through it and tearing it up. Now, from my particular background of that part of the world and doing a lot of flying around in circles, looking at stuff, this would have caught my attention and probably moved on to something a little bit more critical because it wasn't doing anything. I need more to come up with it. I find it an interesting thing. I'm not convinced it's on the lens. I'm pretty sure of what I think is happening, but I'd love to hear more of it, especially the part with water, only from the geography of spending so much of my life there. If there's a body of water this thing dived in, I can only think of one part of Iraq that could have possibly happened in. And that's up in the northeast corner of the country. So I'd be interested to get more of it as it comes up. All right.
We need to know more about it, all the provenance of all the data with it.
Sure. And the dribs and drabs. But if you're working hits on a website, and I'm not throwing any slander at anybody out there doing it. If you're looking for traffic, bits and pieces add to the mystique of smuggled out video that was taken on a phone that was put on Kodak film and then put back onto videotape. And here we bring it to you live 8 years later or 20 years later or 15 years later, what's happening. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, Mark, I brought up was in wartime, UFOs in wartime is a really interesting subject because there's so many strange things going on that people catch notice of. And
Foo Fighters.
I don't want to dismiss Chris's comment. No one else seems to be looking or reacting to this thing if it's actually happening on the base. I can give some explanation to that, but it's a good point. It's a good investigator kind of the point. So
that's right.
Tune in for our discussion over the next few shows, what the prediction of 24 is. I'm going to throw one out there. I don't think we're going to have a major reveal, but I think there's going to be a significant publicized event as we approach the election at the end of the year. I think you're going to see something in the middle of the summer going towards the fall that is going to capture the media attention cycle. And I'll develop that more as we go through the year. Starting with you, Chris.
I
think words.
I personally think that we're not going to see a lot this 2024 because I think there's going to be more conflict in the Middle East. I think there's going to be more conflict in the world, and I think our attention will be drawn to that. And I think the UFO subject will be put on the back burner because of what we're going to end up in, possibly a world war. I see a lot of evidence that there's going to be huge conflicts.
Martin.
Mark my words. Aliens. There, I said it. Now I'm going to have to live with it.
There you go. Thank you. The esteemed man from South Carolina as he puts his eyewear back on.
Oh,
Don.
I gotta agree with Chris. I've got a bad feeling about this upcoming year. I've been watching events in the Middle East as closely as I can. I have a sneaking suspicion events will spiral out of control even more than they currently are. This business with these Houthi rebels continuously firing missiles and drones.
Don, I got to grab you because we're coming to the end of the show, and I will make the announcement because Skywatcher put it into our private chat. We just had an attack by the U.S. and the U.K. on the Houthis. So we may have taken a more offensive approach on
And
that.
there you go, folks.
Okay, so from UAP Crossfire, for Chris, Martin, Don, and our super special drop-in guest, Mark, as always, thank you very much for listening to us. God's peace that surpasses all understanding. We will see you Monday night on Don's show, and next week, very special show with a special guest as well. Thank you again, all. Out from
See
here.
ya.